Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
This week's national interest stays with the higher, larger strategic issues, and I dare to start this with some words of vicious and nasty popular wisdom from the Hindi heartland. And if I'm not able to translate these well enough, that's because I don't have the skills, and also because this metaphor is not easily translated, but I will try and convey a message. So, you remember, many of you would remember those lines, खड़क सिंह के खड़कने से खड़कती हैं खिड़कियां और खिड़कियों के खड़कने से खड़कता है खड़क सिंह. Now, those who don't understand Hindi, let me just say that it's a bit like when somebody pretends to be so scary and screams so much to scare others that the only one who ends up scaring is himself. Now, why are we using this to describe Joe Biden's response to the American retreat and the bombings now in Kabul? Because he spoke several hours after the bombings and he said, "We will not forgive, we will not forget, we will hunt you down and make you pay." Right? 13 of his soldiers had died at least, and nearly 100 people had died in these bombings. Until now, he wasn't doing very much. Until now, he seemed to be quite smug that his forces were coming back and the rest was Afghan people's problem. Now, this was a valiant attempt to sound angry, resolute and menacing. It didn't work like that. He ended up, regrettably, for him and his nation, looking exactly like what he is, a sheep in sheep's clothing. We use harsh language, but there is a reason we do that, and we'll explain that in this week's national interest. Because in polarized time, Biden's committed voters might still have tears of inspiration in their eyes listening to him right now. Most of the others will feel sorry for him or laugh at him. And the target of his frustrated ire in the AFPAC region, the terrorists, they will not be impressed. I can guarantee you that. Don't even try and compare it with Saigon in 1975. This is a bigger humiliation for America. There, at least, America was up against a fairly regular army against a country with a territory, with a very famous and very strong leader, and also fully backed by the entire communist bloc, which was very powerful then with the Soviet Union and China there. There was also wide popular support within Vietnam. So, in fact, when the Americans left, and finally, when the Viet Cong took over, there was celebration. It felt like a liberation. This is an unconditional surrender to an amorphous, armed rabble with no pretensions to a state structure, territorial foothold, or international support, unless you think Quetta is a territorial foothold for the Taliban. And no international support, unless you find it face-saving to say that you surrendered instead to Pakistan. You prefer that? Go ahead, be my guest, no skin off my nose. It is indeed Pakistan whose Prime Minister has claimed that it's a liberation in Afghanistan, that Afghans have thrown away the shackles of slavery of the past. Now, does it look like liberation anywhere? If this was a liberation, then you would have had Afghan people coming out in streets everywhere, celebrating, embracing the Taliban, the victorious Taliban, and saying, "Thank you very much, you liberated our country, you've thrown away the yoke of American occupation." Is that happening? Is any of that happening anywhere? No. It doesn't look like liberation. In fact, what's happening right now looks like capitulation and occupation. Because people in their tens of thousands are now running for Kabul airport. Why? To get the hell out of Afghanistan. And we've been focused just on Kabul airport, but see what's happening on the Pakistan border, at all the border checkpoints, generally porous border. People are now piling in and people want to leave Afghanistan. Normally, if there's a liberation, you will find people from outside, skilled Afghans, Afghan patriots coming back in. In this case, the best of Afghans, the best educated Afghans, the most skilled Afghans all want to run away. There is a desperation to leave. In fact, more of them went to the Kabul airport even a day after the bombings, undeterred by the bombings. Ki jaan jaye to jaye, but get the hell out of Afghanistan. Not a scene of liberation by any stretch of imagination. Now, defense from the Biden team that they are only picking up the pieces after Trump. That doesn't work either, because Trump had decided to leave, But he had not decided to leave unconditionally. His surrender was not unconditional. Those talks were still going on, and in fact, he had not even accepted the principle of the Taliban calling themselves the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. If you see the document of the agreement signed between Trump administration and the Taliban at Doha, and you will see a screenshot of the first page, see where the Taliban describe themselves as Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, but in brackets it says which US does not recognize. In this case now, the US is acting like the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan run by the Taliban is not just legitimate, but it's also an ally. Today we have a situation where while the country called Afghanistan is broken by a superpower, the superpower itself is broken, and its generals are sharing the identities and whereabouts of its own Afghan assets with the Taliban in the hope that they will protect them. If there is protection, there will also be ransom and protection money. That is, if at all protection is given, and who knows how long will this protection last. Now, this is not quite like the Soviet Union in 1989, because this will not make such a big difference to America right now. But it is a great superpower meltdown which we have seen just now. It has now already reduced Joe Biden. It will do nothing to America. America will remain all right, but it has already reduced Biden administration to the equivalent of spoilt goods in terms of politics, domestic politics. Here is why we use the description sheep in sheep's clothing for Joe Biden. We do it deliberately, consciously, and after a great deal of thinking. That is because unlike Trump or unlike any of his challengers for the Democratic Party nomination, Joe Biden is actually a cold warrior. He is a cold warrior from a certain vintage that might have everything to do with his age, but the fact is that he was brought up in the Cold War environment. At the same time, while he is a cold warrior, he doesn't seem to have much stomach for superpowers, power projection. So what kind of a cold warrior are you if you don't have the stomach for a fight? He's also a rare old cold warrior who is combat averse, who's risk averse. So read Barack Obama's memoir, the first part of his memoir, where he mentions that before he launched Operation Neptune Spear, that is to take out Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad, Joe Biden had actually cautioned him repeatedly, saying, think again, think again, think again. And Obama mentions in his memoir that he remembered that Biden was a member of the team that oversaw Desert One. That is when Jimmy Carter launched what was called Operation Eagle Claw, which involved sending in helicopter-borne special forces to Iran to free the 52 hostages in the American embassy in Tehran. And that operation went wrong. 3 of the 8 helicopters malfunctioned, could not get there. Operation was abandoned, and when they abandoned the operation, they were coming back. One of the remaining helicopters actually banged into one of the transport aircraft, leaving a real mess behind, lots of debris, wreckage, and 8 dead US soldiers as well. So obviously, Biden had that fear, and he knew this time also, I'm adding that, Obama didn't say that, he knew this time also the design of this operation, Neptune Spear, also involved helicopters, and helicopters, as you know, are temperamental. They've let us down once. So he was risk averse. Now, as things turned out, Obama's risk paid off, his gamble paid off. He was able to kill Osama bin Laden, and if anybody says it did not help him and Biden get a second term, then somebody doesn't know politics. But the fact is that even in this operation, one helicopter did let the team down. It's just that the operation went on fine and the US suffered no casualties. So there were risks. Obama took the risk. Biden did not want to take the risk. That is the difference. Now, how did Biden defeat Trump then? Biden defeated Trump by building a political product of kindness, sympathy, and fairness. Check out his statements in the days leading up to the debacle in Kabul. None of these statements reflected any of these qualities for Afghans, for his Afghan allies. Show me one statement that showed sympathy, kindness, fairness for Afghans. They were his friends. They were his He was their guardian. He, as in the President of America, as in America, was their guardian for 20 years. It was a relationship of trust. But everything he said about the Afghans those days was full of contempt, dismissively so. We didn't go to Afghanistan for nation building, he said. Hello. If that was the case, then after 2004, why didn't you come back? 8 years of Obama, why didn't you come back from there? Your job was done, or at least after you had killed Osama bin Laden, you should have come back, but you did not. In fact, from 2004 onwards, every US administration was trying to do nation building and all its allies were involved. Frankly, if I may speak the truth, India was also involved in nation building. That obviously failed. So when it failed, you can say, all right, it failed, I tried. But don't say I never even tried it. The fact is that Iraq, Syria, Libya, every country where you've tried nation building has given you only one lesson, that you can rebuild a nation or you can build a new nation or change the system in a nation if the impulse comes from within the people of that nation. But if you bring it from outside, it never works. It was tried in Afghanistan, it did not work. What did Biden do instead? When the operation failed, he decided to leave. He abandoned the country. He also spoke disparagingly of the Afghan army. He said the Afghan army didn't fight. He said Ghani ran away. True, Ghani acted disgracefully. But is that how you talk about somebody who was your ally till the other day and who you abandoned when chips were down? Right? And Afghan army was fighting until the capitulation of the last 3, 4, 5 days. And how badly they were let down by the Americans. Read this article. I'm sharing a link with you with the description, by an Afghan general, a bright young Afghan general, a tough Afghan general called General Sami Sadat, who was earlier corps commander in Lashkar Gah and later promoted as operations chief for the entire Afghan army. He's written this article, an op-ed article in the New York Times. See the cry from his heart. He said, we had been trained to fight in multiple dimensions, with air cover, with electronics, with surveillance, reconnaissance. All that was missing. And he said, we were fighting and desperately looking up at the skies, and we saw American fighters, American warplanes flying, but not coming in to help us. That is because Biden administration has decided to wash their hands of their own allies. So not only did their air force disappear, it's a different matter now that they've gifted an air force, including such a large number of Black Hawk helicopters, to the Taliban. Of course, I now think Taliban are nice guys after having been defeated by them. But this air force did not come to the help of the Afghan army. Not only that, even the contractors who were supposed to have stayed behind to maintain the air assets, that is the aircraft of Afghan armed forces, they also bolted. Then it became unsustainable for Afghan Air Force to keep operations going because already they were short of pilots. And as that happened, this army, the Afghan army, they were trained to fight in the Western way, in the American way. They were not trained to fight like guerrilla fighters. And once they lost these other dimensions in the battlefield where they are supposed to have had total advantage, they just cracked up. That is what General Sadat's article explains. So please read that article. Now, America has gone away, leaving all these Black Hawks, close support aircraft, thousands of Humvees, lakhs, literally hundreds of thousands of assault rifles, machine guns, automatic weapons to the Taliban. Now, what kind of commander-in-chief leads his forces or his nation in a retreat like this? That it has happened at Afghanistan's cost is Afghanistan's problem, but it has also caused great damage to America's own image, particularly when the commander-in-chief has been so dismissive of the whole thing until Thursday evening, when the human bombers blew themselves up at Kabul airport. And there also, when the first reports of casualties among US troops came in, and by the evening, our time, we knew that they were US forces fatalities, and that is what changed the mood in Washington, and that is what got this completely dismissive, contemptuous, happy Biden, who had earlier said, don't bother me with these negative questions, I have nice things to look forward to like this weekend, right? He suddenly came out in this maybe Trump avatar, right? Or maybe George Bush avatar. In fact, it's more of a George Bush avatar because It is George Bush Jr. who had said, we'll smoke him out, we will smoke him out of their holes, etc., etc. But when he said that, at least he carried out this threat, and it looked like he had meant to carry out that threat. What will Biden do now if he has to at least live up to this boast? He will then have to, first of all, quickly conclude that this was only the handiwork of Islamic State of Khorasan province, right? So completely absolve the Taliban, Haqqani network, ISI, everybody. Everybody knows very little can happen in those parts without the ISI knowing it, mostly without the ISI wanting it to happen, but usually not without the ISI knowing it. What will happen now? If he wants to now show to his constituents कि मैंने भी जाके मारा, right? So ISKP, then identify a leader for ISKP or a leadership, then say they are hiding in such and such place, then send a couple of drones there or send some air assets there and bomb the hell out of that place. But how will he do it? He can only do it with Pakistan's help, because there is no way his aircraft, his drones in any case is out of the question because drones have that range. There is no way they can reach any of those parts unless they are allowed the use of Pakistan airspace. Even his carrier-borne aircraft, if the carriers are in the Persian Gulf, have to fly over Pakistan. Definitely they are not going to fly over Iran to go and bomb some place. It's not going to happen without Pakistan's help. So for 2 decades, the US paid in blood and blood money for dependence on Pakistan to carry out one president's boast, that is Bush Jr.'s boast. Now, having been defeated by Pakistan's proxies, another president will go to Rawalpindi's embrace to satisfy his constituents. We know how easily stupidity can be shared across political divides. The only quality most bipartisan in a democracy is stupidity. So it's possible, but where will Biden's US go next after it has killed the current ISKP chief? What will happen after that? Will ISKP stop after that? Will any of the other terrorist groups stop after that? Within the same day, ISKP, if it is ISKP, will have another chief. Then this warfare will resume. Afghanistan will back to being the global nursery of Islamic extremism. Anybody who thinks the Taliban, under the tutelage of the Pakistanis, will be able to secure a nation state as amorphous and as disorganized as this, as Afghanistan, with its highly indoctrinated groups and population, is erring gravely. But again, that error has been made more than once in the past as well. This will again resume the same old vicious cycle. Terrorism, war on terror, Pakistan as a stalwart ally in that war on terror, which it will make you lose in the end. It may not hurt Biden's votes back home too much, because as we saw with Trump's numbers in an election, although he lost it, he got more votes than before, many more votes than before. The base these days, quote unquote, the base these days is enormously forgiving of its chosen leader. So his voters, maybe his loyal voters, will stay with him. But it will greatly hurt Americans' self-image of power. All US allies, including India, Japan, Taiwan, Australia, the Quad, South Korea, they've all been jolted. If this is all it takes for Biden's America to cut and run, cursing and blaming an ally under fire, how would a Taiwan, Japan or South Korea count on it against the Chinese? Or India for that matter? What is the Quad then, if not another fancy periodic naval parade or spectacle? Uske saath band bhi laga do. Should be a proper naval band with Quad exercises as well, right? This passes, that passes. It will lose all meaning. Whatever Biden might or might not do to terrorists who bombed Kabul, that's a secondary issue. He surely turned global strategic thinking inside out.